Institute, author of the new book, The American Founders. And we recommend it to you. We commend it to you highly. Lou, great to have you here.
Good to be here, Lou.
Let's start with tapering. Does it matter, in your judgment, to these markets whether the Fed makes a modest decision to quit buying $10 billion worth of either mortgage bonds or treasuries?
If it were just a modest tapering, which is to say just a few $1 billion, I don't think it would make any difference in the markets. It would make some difference in the psychology of the markets because tapering, the Federal Reserve System, has become the most powerful financial institution, not only in America, but in the world. So a lot of people would gauge their behavior by whether or not the Fed was going to continue to pour out cheap and easy money.
Cheap and easy money, at some point, we are led to believe, will end. Janet Yellen, who will be replacing Ben Bernanke with the new year, says she's going to continue these easy money policies. It is a very big, warm embrace by the Fed for easy money policies, as far as the eye can see, say March or maybe April.
Yes. Well, first of all, Janet Yellen has to be approved by the Senate, and there are a lot of senators who are anxious to hold up this nomination.
Right.
She's a known Federal Reserve establishment bureaucrat and economist. She's also...
You didn't say card carrying there.
No, no. Those are the old days, Lou. I think we both might have said that then. So she has to get through the Senate. I do believe she will, but I think it's going to be a surprisingly contentious hearing and voting procedure. But Janet Yellen is bright, and she knows that in order to taper, they have to do it extremely gradually and in a minimalist fashion.
In that regard, she certainly understands that. Ben Bernanke understands it. The entire Federal Open Market Committee understands that. Yet investors are acting as if this were a conclave of idiots meeting to set monetary policy, that they would act rashly, they would do something draconian and destructive in making a judgment about their decision to ease up on bond purchases. Why is that? Why has that permeated both the press and apparently the policy thinking in this country on the part of, whether they're hedge fund masters or whether they're running a desk for one of the banks?
Two reasons, I think. One is it sells newspapers, among other things, even TV shows. Second,
we would never, ever sully ourselves in such a way.
Pure, fair and balanced. And the other reason is that for 5 years now, the only game in town has been easy and cheap money by the Fed. And they've been pouring it out with the stock market in part as their target. So everybody on Wall Street basically believes they need a Federal Reserve wind at their back in order to keep making money.
The politics are obvious in this, and we all understand that. What is not obvious are the economics. And to suggest that that easing be ended here when inflation is running well below the target of 2 to 2.5%, it has to concern, I would think, everyone who does any thinking about economics that we may be at the cusp of disinflation here just as readily as we are perhaps approaching inflationary pressures. What are your thoughts?
Well, disinflation is, in fact, with us, as you are implying. And that's because of the enormous debts held by the public and the private, and the tremendous drive to repay debts. Repaying debts, that is to say, paying off the banks, is itself disinflationary because it tends to reduce the quantity of money in circulation along with the level of economic activity. If I pay back my mortgage rather than using the money to buy a car, it doesn't do anything to stimulate production. So I think that there is a reasonable fear that disinflation it not only haunts the Fed, but it haunts those people who are too deeply in debt. So you live in a world created by the Fed where for about 5 years we've had bubbles in the stock market and farmland and real estate for the rich, and all we've had is food stamps for the poor.
And which is, in your judgment, largely the legacy of the Federal Reserve, celebrating now its 100th anniversary.
Well, a word can be said about that, Lou. All the scholarship shows that the Federal Reserve System, which was inaugurated in 1913, was the primary cause of the Great Depression of the 1930s, basically a 10-year depression rescued by the Second World War. Also, the cause of the terrible depression after the First World War. And then almost every one of the business cycles after the Second World War. It's not a legacy that we can be proud of, and inasmuch as it's the most powerful financial institution in the world, it is a cause for some grave concern.
Lou, it's always great to be with you and to hear your views. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lou.
Lou Lehrman. His book is The American Founders. It's on sale now online. Go to loudobbs.com for links. Lou, great to have you here. We're going to continue the conversation as we have for some years now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
Stay with us. President Obama, in a category all of his own, well,